Sega, to my knowledge, has got a new wraparound vision screen available right now. At least it's been advertised or it's coming out. Maybe they could provide some more information about that. But that's where kids literally physically participate in the violence. You see, the studies that need
behavior by children who watch it, then it should be even more so with video games, because the child is more actively involved in the video game. I mean, he's not just watching, he's making the violence happen. Now, has that been tested yet, or it hasn't been?
No, it
Here, that creating a rating system is, in my opinion, the very least the video game industry can do, not the best they can do. It would be far better for America's parents and children if the industry simply kept the worst violence and sex out of their games.
No sex? No violence? What a fucking wet blanket. What you just watched were clips from the U.S. Senate's hearing on violence in video games, hosted by none other than the former dipshit-in-chief, Senator Joe Lieberman, who holds a place in the top 10 dumbest fuckwits ever to come out of Connecticut, which is a list that, of course, includes yours truly. In this hearing, there was a serious attempt by largely people acting out of genuine concern, but arguing in bad faith, to put the blame for capital B bad things on the media that we consume, and in turn to divert the blame from the people that do bad things. It also does not escape me that rather than at any point bringing up the parental responsibility to police what you do and don't want your kids to see and do, the entirety of the hearing makes a point to push that responsibility onto the companies making these games. Rather than making a good point that the rating system introduced for games around this time provided parents with the necessary tools to judge if a game was meant for their kid or not, Joe Lieberman and company did their best to make everything sound as menacing as possible. It's amazing to me that this fuckwad really thought that reading out Splatterhouse 3's advertisement slowly and menacingly would make it sound anything other than fun as hell. Take it away, Joe.
He's back. Splatterhouse 3 for the Sega Genesis is the kind of game rating systems were invented for. Now, and then it goes on at the bottom to advertise that it includes deadly new weapons, 6 levels of monster bashing mayhem, and killer special moves.
I mean, I'm sold. Why does any of this matter, though? We'll get back to Mr. Lieberman, but for now, my name is not absolutely sure, and while normally I don't think this is pertinent information, I am just recently, as a matter of fact, 25 years old. And this matters because I am playing for the first time and reviewing the original Doom from 1993, a game that preceded my existence by 6 whole years. When it comes to playing a game like the original Doom that was created before I was even born, it's always a bit of an odd experience. I miss out on things like the zeitgeist surrounding the game and the novelty of it being new, but on the flip side, I also get to pay respect to the source of a gazillion different game ideas and tropes that we just kind of take for granted nowadays. The Doom of 1993 was cutting edge in a lot of ways, and there's entire books written on the unique circumstances and partnerships that led to the perfect storm of creation that spat out Doom, and yet somehow, even now, almost 20 years later, despite its whirlwind of development, it's impossible to talk about the history of video games without at least mentioning Doom. The influence of this game is so insanely widespread that I'm not even going to try to give you a rundown of it, especially since I wasn't around to experience all the mods and clones coming out in the immediate years following its release. AVGN has a great video covering some of the history of Doom and its many console ports if that interests you, and I'll link that in the description below. For context though, thanks in no small part to the recent revival of boomer shooters, I got the itch to go back and try out one of the boomeriest of the shooters, and one of the namesakes of the genre. It's also just now clicking for me reading this out that the existence of boomer shooters implies the existence of zoomer shooters, which has to be like Fortnite and Overwatch. Oh my god, I hate it. In the past few years, though, the genre has flourished with universe-specific takes on the genre, like Postal Brain Damaged or Warhammer 40k Bolt Gun, and then you have entirely new takes on the genre, like Ultrakill and Mullet Mad Jack. Frankly, we are in a renaissance of boomer shooters, to the point that I had to question my long-held belief that I didn't really like playing them. I was very fucking wrong about that. These games are amazing, and they all pay homage or owe a debt to Doom in some way, shape, or form. It speaks to the ongoing and ever-expanding legacy of Doom that to this day, there are still mods and complete overhauls of the game being developed and thrown out to the masses, largely for free. Brutal Doom is the first that comes to mind, and should I cover that in a future video? Let me know in the comments. But the fact that Doom was released as shareware all those years ago is something I would go out on a limb and give a big lump of credit to for the fact that you still hear about Doom today. There's a lot of classic games that worm their way into discussions surrounding games now. I mean, good lord, I'd love to watch a video essay that didn't mention Ocarina of Time for once. But very few of them have had such a widespread influence as Doom, which in all fairness is at least partially thanks to the kick-ass 2016 remake of Doom and one of my personal favorite first-person shooters, 2020's Doom Eternal. Jesus Christ, has it really been that long since Eternal came out? The Doom of 1993 has been ported to a more billion different consoles, and one of the craziest things to me is that I booted up the Steam version, my very first time opening Doom ever, and it just fucking works out of the box. How many old-ass games have broken and busted up Steam ports nowadays that make them completely unplayable? I mean, I get it to a degree. High refresh rates and frame rates, new operating systems, and a ton of other compatibility issues abound with games like, the original Max Payne, for example. A lot of them need surgery just to get past the main menu, but Doom just works. And I mean, of course it does. It's fucking Doom. Two things stuck out to me right away, the first of which being the limitations that I was very much not used to. There is no looking up or down, and there's no jump button. Spacebar, which has been conditioned for almost every PC gamer to be the jump button by this point, is instead used to finger fuck the walls in search of secret doors. It's better than finger fucking the demons, I guess, but hey, if you could do that, then Joe Lieberman really would have had a field day, huh? The second thing that stuck out to me was the UI. At the time of recording this video, there has recently been a conversation ongoing about the yellow paint prevalent in the remake of Resident Evil 4 as a marker to let you know you can kick, punch, shoot, or climb something. It tips off players that things are interactable, which is a necessary evil to a degree in games where everything looks way better than it did 20 years ago on a technical level. But that can also prove to make it kinda hard to know what is and isn't meant to be a game element versus just being environmental flavor. Doom, on the other hand, enjoys a very simple, readable UI that's obtrusive for sure. I mean, it takes up like a fifth of the screen, but it's also foolproof, and I would know I am in fact a fool. You've got the current ammo, number percentage for health and armor, and Doom Guy's face in the middle even gets bloodied as you get a little fucked up. There's a more detailed ammo chart on the right if you need it, highlighted numbers to let you know there are guns on those number keys, and 3 slots to let you know which of the key cards you have already picked up. Now the map, I don't love the map, or at least I found it a bit difficult to parse at times, especially on the levels with overlapping layers. It became a bit much. I found myself playing entirely in the map on occasion while looking for paths through areas I'd already cleared of enemies, but I will say it's nice to see in the upper left how many health pots, enemies, and secrets are left. All the information is right there and accessible to you, and thankfully the art style of the game means that you don't really need yellow paint because interactable objects for the most part stick out like a sore thumb, and there aren't many variations of these interactable objects, so you know what you're looking for most of the time. This is a luxury that modern games don't have, as games get progressively more complex visually, and sadly yellow paint is one of the solutions, even if it kills the aesthetic sometimes. Something I do really appreciate about Doom is that simplicity. A lot of modern video games that you can play take for granted the language of video games that a lot of us now know, and trust that players will go poke the thing or know how a certain mechanic works inherently because we all play a lot of games. Anytime the yellow paint conversation crops up and people freak out about how awful the paint is, I'm reminded of Bulletstorm's devs saying how they literally could not get playtesters to shoot explosive barrels unless they were made red. I'm not a huge fan of the yellow paint either. It's kind of ugly to look at, but I don't know if game devs have found the solution to this problem yet. This is a problem that Doom doesn't have though. If you drop someone that has never played games before into a modern FPS or third-person shooter, that yellow paint might actually help them know, hey, I can go do something with this. Without that paint, it is very, very possible that they would be lost. I don't think that holds true for Doom. Doom being a level-based game with the same objective every time doesn't stop it from keeping things fresh mechanically. It more than held my attention for the entire runtime without me ever feeling bored. But that simplicity does afford Doom the ability to just drop you into a level and let you figure shit out. Rip and tear until it is done. And being done in this case means finding all the key cards and pressing the button at the end of the level when you find it. On another note, one of the other pitfalls of going back to play games like Doom that sparked whole genres or massive trends in games is that oftentimes you find that the original just feels generic because you've already experienced the copies so much that you're kind of sick of the stuff that was brand spanking new at the time. Doom doesn't feel that way to me. As a matter of fact, this is probably the best aged game I've played from before my time. It's so fun, and the music, oh my god, the music is fucking amazing. The gore is honestly, even for today's standards, pretty goddamn gross, and the bodies just stay there on the ground as you move through the levels. Going back to that gore though, don't you worry, Mr. Lieberman, I didn't forget about you. I do find it kind of wild that even today, the only thing that outgrosses the Doom of 1993 is like the Doom of modern times. I guess you could make an argument for Scorn, but that's just a bunch of penis puzzles, and Doom Eternal is a crazy evolution of the game on your screen right now. And for a classic, I gotta say, it really holds up. The sound design in particular is fantastic. I mean, everything has a very distinct sound to it, so if you listen really closely, you can know what's around the corner. And the visuals are dated, yes, but they're so readable, and the designs in pixel art is really fucking cool. And speaking of fucking, you get a big fucking gun, and you can use that big fucking gun to melt a bunch of demons down to their base evolution of being a pile of microplastics on the floor. You know, I watched a lot of the Senate hearing on violence in games. It was like 3 hours long. It was kind of a waste of my life, if I'm being honest with you. But the Senate hearing wasn't the be-all, end-all. I remember growing up hearing snippets on the news showing programs on violence in games and on TV, and reporters were always very particular to say that the parents are worried, not that the research shows there's an actual problem or correlation. As we all well know, fear-mongering works by planting the seed. If you tell parents that they are worried about something long enough for the sake of their kids, they might actually just start being worried. The actual data seems to conflict a lot. There's seemingly evidence for both sides of the case, but thankfully the general consensus is that it's a wash. I'll go out on a limb here and say that, in my opinion, there's no real positive or negative influences on kids from violent media. Having parents that give a shit or not does a lot more to influence how we grow up than anything we watch on TV. I do have to share that one of the funniest parts of these conversations that I saw from the old news that I scrubbed and the articles written at the time is that they all seem to suppose that these kids are like perfect, flawless little creatures. My rebuttal to that is, do you remember when you were a kid? Have you ever been like around family when little kids play games outside? I have cousins and family that are pretty young, and those little shits and their friends walk right up to each other and say stuff like, I just chopped your head off with a chainsaw and you lose. And the other one goes, no, you didn't, you missed, and I'm immune and you're stupid. And then they like just keep running around the yard with their little toy lightsabers or whatever. Doom and violent games, or even just violent media at large, isn't making kids more violent or causing them to do terrible things. One of the most astonishing, lasting legacies of Doom to me is that even now, there's still a really large group of people who think that video games are the cause of awful things and make kids into awful people. That's just crazy to me. I mean, especially when all children by default are little gremlins that don't have empathy installed in their operating systems until their parents do it for them. Video games are not the reason your little Timmy shoved a crayon up Susie's nose at daycare. And second of all, fuck you. I had like 2 pages written out explaining why games being violent or depicting awful things doesn't actually inspire recreations of that violence, but I'd be preaching to the choir. I sincerely doubt anyone that actually believes that nonsense, any Joe Liebermans, so to say, would be watching a short video essay about Doom by a small to medium-sized YouTuber. We're really close to 3K, by the way. Thank you for that. Rather than talking your ear off, though, in closing, I'd like to share this anecdote. When I was a kid, I remember my grandpa playing Far Cry and Call of Duty on PC. Now, he served during World War II and actually saw action, like the action being depicted in Call of Duty. And you want to know what he had to say about those games? I remember this like it was yesterday. Direct quote. Oh boy, this sure is a lot of fun, Jake. Come help me kill some Nazis. You'll like this. And that's actually kind of what he sounded like a little bit too. Most of the people still propagating these stupid fucking arguments today are 100 years old and have probably been whining about violence in games since the very first Doom came out, or maybe even before that. I am a Zoomer that enjoys boomer shooters, but I can say for certain I'm not the biggest fan of boomers themselves. They're a generation of sociopaths, hell-bent on fucking over people my age, exploiting us for all we're worth, and then dying off, leaving us to pick up the pieces, but not before blaming us for giving up as they fall into their caskets. You know, there's this thought I have sometimes, usually when I've had a bit too much of the green stuff, that at any moment, the giant ball of gas over our heads that keeps us alive could suddenly go supernova and incinerate us and all our neighbor planets like we were never here. I mean, Zoomers are just kind of like, we're fucked. It's just kind of a fact that a huge chunk of my generation do not have savings account and will also never own a home. That kind of sucks balls. It's hard to invest in a future that, you know, we know for a fact is not there for us. It's very difficult to think about all of that and then also show up to a shift at the local Olive Garden the next day to get yelled at by mall people and tipped not nearly enough to pay your rent. But, as the late great Kurt Vonnegut says, so it goes. I do realize that not all boomers are to blame, but it's hard not to have some frustration built up towards them when the people that are the root cause of the situation the world is in right now are largely baby boomers. It makes you wonder if the world would be better off if it really did have portals to hell open up where we all get dragged down to the land of demons in an instant, or if it's better as it is, making a slow, gradual descent into a boring dystopia like we are now. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I just wish the people who were around when Doom came out in 1993 were as cool in 2024 as Doom still is. Some of you are pretty cool, and you guys did make some pretty kick-ass games. Thanks for watching.
Called a justifier. In other words, this is the handheld implement with which you play the game by shooting it at the screen, and the more successful you are, the more powerful the gun becomes.